My coworker tried to sabotage me in front of the boss. So I let her explain the project she never worked on. She quit the next day. I had been the quiet one on my team for 3 years. The person who showed up early, left late, fixed the things everyone else swore they'd handle, and never asked for credit. When I look back now, I can see how that quietness looked to other people. Reliable, unambitious, comfortable with being the scaffolding behind other people's spotlights. To me it felt practical. I like solving problems. I like the small, steady satisfaction of code compiling without errors, of a slide deck clicking together, of a product demo that went smoothly because someone, me, had gone through the checklist twice. My name is Marcus Hale. I'm 32, and I work in product operations at a mid-sized software company in Denver. We build workflow tools for field service teams, the sort of thing technicians use on tablets and dispatchers use on dashboards. Not glamorous but useful. My boss Claire pays attention to detail and expects the rest of us to care about the details, too. She's the sort of manager who notices numbers, timelines, and whether someone remembered to CC stakeholders. That's the environment where I thrive. Enter Lila. Lila had joined the company 9 months before the incident. She wore her confidence like a designer suit, well-tailored, bright, and impossible to ignore. She had a marketing background, an impressive LinkedIn, and a way of telling the story of a project that made it sound like she'd built the entire platform from scratch. Claire liked her charm, so did half the office. Lila's desk was always surrounded by conversation. She mentored interns. She posted the right things on Slack. She was the person who could walk into a room and tilt the air to attention. Which is why when she chose me as an obstacle it was so quiet and so petty that it could have been written off as a misunderstanding. But it wasn't. The product we were launching was a routing optimizer, an add-on module that had been a year in planning. It was supposed to reduce idle time for technicians by 18 to 22%, based on our pilot. I'd been lead on the integration work, coordinating APIs between the routing engine and our mobile clients, documenting the flows, writing the handoff notes and the rollout checklist. I'd spent evenings sketching sequence diagrams at the kitchen counter and weekends testing edge cases with a small group of contractors. Lila's role, according to the org chart, was stakeholder management and external communications. In practice, she attended the customer calls, took notes, and added polish to the external messaging. She was helpful. We weren't competitive professionally, her strengths complemented mine. I never suspected she'd try to make my work her theater prop. The incident happened during a demo for our executive team and 3 of our earliest pilot customers. Claire wanted the demo to show 2 things, the live routing in action and the admin console where dispatchers could adjust constraints. The morning felt normal, jittery, caffeinated until it wasn't. We had everyone on a video call. The pilot techs were on their tablets ready. I shared the prototype environment, clicked through the routing scenario, and everything looked good. Then in the middle of the demo, the app threw an error when the dispatcher tried to change a constraint. A small red banner, route calculation failed, invalid payload. Technical things fail, you learn that early in this business, but the behavior that followed didn't feel like coordination or calm. It felt like performance. Lila's camera angle changed so you could see her over the top of her monitor. "Oh wow," she said, hands spread. "Marcus, did you write that new API contract? Because I swear the payloads customers are sending don't match what's in the spec. This whole module looks rushed." It was a line delivered with altitude, equal parts accusation and show. Claire's face tightened. The customers typed questions into the chat. For a few seconds the demo room filled with silence that had teeth. I could have explained. We'd implemented a defensive payload validator precisely to catch malformed requests from an older field client. The error meant we were correctly rejecting invalid input. I had the log messages up on my side, I had the fix already staged. But for the first time in my life I hesitated. Why did I hesitate? Because Lila's tone implied sabotage. It implied I had cut corners. In a single breath she had broadcast to the executives and to the customers that the product was unreliable because I was incompetent. It was a professional shove in front of a crowd. It is shocking how small that shove felt when the room was empty, and how enormous it looked when everyone was watching. I said nothing at first. That felt like a mistake later, but at the time it felt like an intentional decision, not to feed the performance. Claire took control, told the customer we'd pick up logs and follow up with a patch by midday. The demo ended, the customers thanked us politely, and we exited the call. Afterward, in the conference room, Lila expanded. She spoke with a decisiveness that could have been useful. "We need to lengthen the test window and delay the release," she said. "I don't think Marcus accounted for malformed payloads at scale. We should pull this." Her eyes locked on Claire. "We can't risk our clients." Claire looked at me. "She trusts me." I saw the question in her face. Is this a problem? Did I miss something? Inside I was a centrifuge of feelings: anger, humiliation, disbelief. I wanted to say, "No, I'm on it. Here, look at the logs." But again, I didn't. I was stunned, not just by the accusation, but by the way it had been framed in front of the people who make the decisions to fund or freeze a project. That night, I drove home with the demo playing on an endless loop in my head. My hands gripped the steering wheel. The city lights of Denver blur like falling confetti when you replay something over and over. I thought about the month of evenings I'd spent rechecking edge cases. I thought about the late-night Slack messages where I'd walked a confused contractor through a workflow. I thought about all the small, invisible tasks that keep a product safe. And I thought about Lila's clean, practiced outrage. I considered retaliation. I imagined calling her out in the next meeting, listing the documents showing the commits. I did not want to be petty, I wanted to be right. But the more I thought about direct confrontation, the clearer the risks felt. Claire could see both our versions. The executives could get nervous. The product could get delayed. If this became a fight, everyone would be hurt. So I made a different decision. I let her speak. The opportunity came 2 days later. We had a cross-functional review with sales, support, and product marketing. The routing module was on the agenda. Lila presented the customer-facing materials. She stood at the front of the room, in person this time, and explained how the module worked. Her slide deck was glossy, full of charts and confident talking points. It was the sort of presentation people nod at. I sat in the back and wrote down questions, not to ambush her but to give myself leverage. They weren't mean questions. They were pointed. How does the admin console handle legacy client payloads? Where are the acceptance tests for the constraint update API? Who is the code owner for the routing flow? I watched as Lila smiled and answered most of them in generalities. She talked about validation pipelines and data hygiene. She waved her hands and said things like, "We have monitoring," which sounded good but lacked specific owners or links to the engineering documents. She claimed the integration had been QA'd end-to-end by the integration team. Her slide moved on. The room applauded lightly. Things were smooth. Nothing exploded. I kept my notes. When it was my turn, I asked the questions. I asked for the names and for the repos. I asked a simple, honest question. Who can show the exact acceptance test that fails when the payload is malformed, and where is that run in CI? It felt boring to say it out loud, but that was precisely the point. Lila paused. Her smile changed. She pointed to Claire as if to say, "See, this is technical." Claire looked pleasantly surprised by the attention to detail. Lila's answers had been sufficient for non-technical stakeholders. For me, they felt paper-thin. Lila's earlier performance had read as professional virtue signaling. Here, in an ordinary meeting, the question asked for details, for the living documentation of work. That is where the story changes. She stumbled. Not elegantly. Not, "I don't have that right now, but I can get it." She stumbled like someone who had been speaking confidently about a project she had not owned. She called it a cross-team effort. She said, "We verified in staging," but couldn't name the repo, the PR, or the test suite. When I asked who'd written the API validator library, she said a name that didn't exist on the engineering roster. At that moment, the room became quiet in a different way than before. Not the silence of confrontation, but the silence of coming clarity. There was a space between what had been presented and what had been done. The air felt less like accusation and more like discovery. I didn't gloat. I didn't point fingers dramatically. I simply walked the room through the chain of custody. The ticket that requested the validator, the PR number, the staging job, the acceptance test name, and the timestamp on the last successful run. I pulled my laptop up and shared the logs. I showed the commit history. I showed the comments where our contractors had raised edge cases, and where I had replied with clarifying examples. It's humiliating to admit that when you prove you weren't wrong, you feel a strange aftertaste inside, a mixture of vindication and exhaustion. It's like discovering someone tried to set fire to a building, only to learn you'd already poured water on it last week. Claire leaned in. Where did Lila get her notes? She asked, eyes soft with curiosity rather than accusation. Lila's cheeks flushed. A silence stretched. She looked smaller. She began to look at her hands. And then something happened that surprised me. She tried to explain the integration, the one she hadn't worked on, in a way that mimicked the technical writing in my docs. She used my terms. She used the exact metaphor I'd used in a contract note 2 days earlier. It was awkward. When she failed, the words sounded borrowed. The room felt embarrassed for her. After the meeting, people came up to me quietly. The account director thanked me for clarifying. A couple of engineers sent private messages, good catch. The customers emailed later that day with follow-up questions, the kinds of follow-ups I had already anticipated and pre-answered inside an internal doc. I sent them the page link. One replied with gratitude. Another asked for a slightly different edge case. I made a note. Lila didn't confront me. She didn't apologize. She started to keep a distance. Her easy access to stakeholders felt more guarded. The current of office gossip strengthened around the edges, whispers about competence and credit, but I didn't feed it. I stayed at my desk and kept answering tickets. 2 days later, Lila handed in her resignation. It arrived in an indifferently written HR email. Personal reasons, she said, that read like a carefully constructed exit poll. She gave 2 weeks. She said she loved the company. She wished us well. People asked me later whether I'd said anything to make her leave, whether I'd called her out. The truth is more complicated. I had not called her out publicly. I had allowed the project to be explained by the person who had actually worked on it, and that quiet insistence on facts, on traceable ownership, did the work. In a company like ours, fabricating expertise is a high-risk gamble. It's survivable for a while, but projects leave digital footprints. Commits, pipelines, PRs, acceptance tests, approvals. They become evidence. Lila's departure stunned some people because she'd always been the sparkle. But it was not a single act that made her go. It was the accumulation of small truths catching up to dazzling performance. After she left, things did not instantly become grand. There were awkward conversations. There were a few clients who wished the presentation had felt smoother. But the product shipped on schedule. The routing module reduced idle times by 19% in our first month of production, and our pilot customers sent us notes of appreciation. Claire thanked the team in a company email that used the word excellent 3 times. A few months passed. I kept doing the same thing I'd always done, showing up, writing clear documentation, fixing mistakes before they were noticed. But the dynamic in the office changed. People started to value traceable work over performance that only looked like substance. Meetings began to ask for owner names and links to repos. Claire introduced a habit we still keep. Every project review now ends with at least one person reading the ownership log. Who did what the acceptance tests are, and where the runbooks live. I will not claim I am a hero. I was and am the team member who cares about the scaffolding. Yet the arc of that period taught me something important. Underdog-to-triumph isn't about dramatic revenge or moralizing to the whole company. It's about quietly insisting on the truth of your work, and making that truth as visible as a polished slide deck. There were consequences I didn't fully anticipate. Lila's resignation left uncomfortable echoes. Some colleagues felt bad seeing someone pushed out, even if that person had misrepresented her work. A handful of my friends at work told me I should have confronted her more directly, should have used the meeting to expose her. I understand that impulse. Public correction functions, it's a theater of justice. But in our context, it would have degraded the relationship with stakeholders, delayed our product, and made the whole team smaller. Instead, I chose the quieter, more boring path: documentation, tests, and follow-through. I explained the system not with smoke and accusation, but with links and timestamps. I invited people into the repo. I taught one intern how to run the acceptance suite. I wrote a where the crumbs are readme that would make it easy for anyone to verify ownership later. Those little acts of transparency mattered more than a single performative confrontation. One of my favorite moments, after the dust settled, happened a month later during a company offsite. Our CEO asked us to share a win and a lesson. An engineer on the mobile team stood up, scratched the back of his neck and said, "My win is that the routing module didn't melt production on Monday. My lesson is that I should have asked for the ownership log sooner." I smiled. We were learning to ask for receipts. There's another part to this story that's quieter but important: how I changed. For a long time I equated being calm and steady with passivity. I thought that if I made noise, I would be seen as eager or troublesome. But the moment someone publicly undermined the work I'd spent months on, I realized calm could be weaponized against you. The lesson I took was simple and useful. Being steady doesn't mean being invisible. You can be steady and insist on clarity. You can document. You can say, here is the ticket, here is the commit, here is the test. That's not revenge, that's professional hygiene. Lila's exit email closed the chapter for her. In the months after, I heard she joined a marketing agency. People in the company had mixed feelings. A few friends reached out to her with support. I wished things had gone differently. For all the performance, there was a human being in the middle of it. But in the end, the company had to be honest with itself. The team needed to know which hands had built which pieces. A year later, the routing module became the backbone of a premium tier product. The initial pilots expanded. Customers were pleased. I had been promoted to senior product operations, which meant more meetings and more responsibility. I negotiated the role to include a mentoring line. I wanted to teach new hires how to map ownership and to write clear runbooks. I cannot explain the strange joy that comes from unglamorous things like checklists being used effectively. It's small, practical, and deeply satisfying. When I tell people this story now, some of them say, wow, she publicly sabotaged you. Others say, good for you, you let her explain it. Both responses reflect a human hunger for neat endings. The truth is messier. The real victory wasn't that she quit. It was that our team learned to prioritize traceability. It was that the company moved, slowly and imperfectly, toward a culture where work speaks for itself. If there's an afterword to this, it's that systems matter more than theater. A well-structured process, named owners, clear repos, and disciplined tests make credibility portable and durable. They shift power from whoever tells the most dazzling story to the people who actually did the work. That's important because if you can make evidence as visible as charm, then you remove the need for drama. I still get nervous when I present. I still rehearse my segments the night before. I still get annoyed when people take credit for things they didn't do. But I also know how to respond now. Not with a louder voice, but with faster links, clearer documentation, and an invitation to inspect the work. And sometimes, when I'm feeling sentimental, I look back at the way the demo failed that day and I laugh quietly. The error banner was small and correct. It caught a malformed payload, which was exactly the kind of thing we hoped our validators would. The little red banner told the truth. Lila wanted performance without the plumbing. I prefer the plumbing. We kept shipping. Marcus.